Welcome to Resilient. My name is Mike Kearney, the Risk and Financial Advisory CMO. As we continue on the COVID-19 journey, we recognize that the pandemic continues to challenge all of us. For the last several months, we've heard from more than 50 leaders as they go deep and reflect on what is really important. I have to say their stories really put resilience into action. They've inspired me. Today, I'm bringing back insights from many of our past episodes. What do these individuals have to say about what makes a resilient leader? What gives them hope? How do they continue to build trust with their stakeholders? As we revisit their stories in this episode, I hope you enjoy the highlights. First up, we talk with leaders about what they can do to learn from the crisis to make themselves and their organizations more resilient. Chris Ruggieri, Eddie Chu, and Theo Niemeyer weigh in. What can leaders do now to learn from this crisis so that they could build a more resilient organization in the future?
Don't assume that plans on paper will work in practice. Understand what some of the implications are, and also appreciate the fact that what you will be encountering the unexpected and be ready to move quickly, make decisions under uncertainty, and evolve as the crisis unfolds.
Well, I would still say that the heart really matters. So I would say being empathetic, I think that would be critical.
I love it. Thank you. Theo?
Yeah. So as Eddie pointed out, I think the human aspect is really important. But in addition to that, you need to have the ability to zoom in and to zoom out. So you never neglect small details, but you're also capable of keeping the strategic picture in the back of your mind, and really listen careful to specialists. They are able to provide you with a lot of information, but don't believe the first thing you hear. Listen to all the information, sum up the options available, and then make the decision and implement the decision. You should be very solution-oriented as a crisis leader.
I love it. I love both of your responses. A resilient leader has to have a heart, because ultimately it is about serving your people, your employees, your customers. And gosh, if we always started with thinking about our people and having empathy, we'd be much better off in this world. Eamon Kelly and Jason Gerzadas share what makes a leader resilient and what gives them hope.
Leaders who are able to expand their circle of empathy as wide as possible and care and pay attention to as many factors, as many constituencies, as many parts of the world, as many demographics as they possibly can, tend to build up a stronger capability to be aware of what's happening in the world and bring their energies in a positive way.
I think there's a genuineness to leaders. They're comfortable with the diversity of opinion and challenge and reflect that in their thinking and approach. I think that leads to resilience.
I've asked this question probably 70 times over the last few years. And my answer has increasingly gotten to every leader that is resilient has hope. But what gives each of you hope for the future? Eamon, I'll start with you.
I believe that we are living through a pandemic and social reaction that is really putting people in touch with the bigger issues. I actually think that there is a reconnection with each other, and I think the notion of community is growing, shared responsibility. And so I think there's just a new wave of human connection, human empathy, the understanding we're all in this together.
Jason, how about you?
I choose to be optimistic and hopeful as well. I think for me, I see the global pandemic. There has to be a silver lining, and it is the global awakening of our consciousness as individuals and as organizations around that these issues that we're seeing can be addressed. And I do think in the goodness of individuals and organizations to rise up to address them. So we have short-term challenges, but I believe in the goodwill of individuals and organizations to address them. And there will be big economic opportunities, but it will also serve humanity. No, so I think this has been the ultimate wake-up call to expose the pre-existing conditions of our society, if you will. And I think that silver lining will bear out and will be addressed. And the organizations that I think recognize that and address it will be rewarded with loyalty and trust and ultimately growth.
Now let's hear from the rock star Lisa Buckingham, Lincoln National Corporation's Executive Vice President and Chief People, Place, and Brand Officer.
I have seen so much positivity come out of the COVID-19 response, much more compassion, really checking in with people. And what gives me hope is that there's some silver linings here, that we're really being provided an opportunity to think differently about how we work together, how we treat one another, how we speak with one another, how we really open up even a conversation, more focus on how people are before you're jumping into work.
John Traub, Kevin Thompson, and Shahira Knight share their perspectives on hope.
What makes me hopeful is that we are an amazingly resilient people. We've been through depression, oil embargoes, financial crises. We've always emerged from it stronger. This is a really, really big challenge, but I think the DNA of the American public is such that we will emerge from it okay.
As terrible and tragic as this global pandemic is, I see two aspects to it. First, I see so much good coming from so many people to help each other out in a time of need, and that really reinforces my faith in the basic goodness of people and quite frankly humanity, and how we can come together to take care of each other to solve tough problems. We're obviously early in this; we're not on the backside of it yet, but people, especially our first responders, the healthcare workers and essential workers, have shown, quite frankly, tremendous empathy, grit, and resilience, and that gives me hope. And second, I'll just add that I think we've been given a very unique gift of a glimpse of how things can be different, and that is good and not so good aspects to it. But that's, whether it be how we work, how we interact with friends and family, what we prioritize, and how we act as a society, and so forth. And this experience can open our eyes to how we can make things better based on these learnings. So that gives me hope too. And our challenge is to find and apply the good in these experiences and not squander that opportunity.
Yeah, Kevin, I agree with you. There's so many things where I'm like, I want to sustain this. Shahira, what gives you hope about the future?
I have to say, I agree with Kevin. The thing that makes me most hopeful is that it has brought out good in people, and I'm hopeful that some of that good outlasts the pandemic.
Mike Dysowski, Tony Blanchard, and Andy Wilson. Let's hear what they have to say.
So I think that the resiliency that companies have shown through past cycles and understanding their business and their markets really give me hope that we'll be coming out of this in a way that will be both successful for the businesses as well as for the people that work for the businesses.
I think there is just something binding about knowing that we're all experiencing this together, and just having some really good open dialogue around what people are experiencing and sharing ideas really gives me a lot of hope around where we go and just how we all come out of this at the end of the day.
Yeah, Tony, it's funny that you say that, because oftentimes there's things that get in between, humans, and it's almost like this pandemic has kind of brought those down and allows us to get to what matters more quickly than maybe we're able to in the past. So I totally agree with you. Andy, how about you? What gives you hope?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think your point that you just made is a really good one, because reality is that I've had better conversations with people, even though they're not face to face in some cases. People, clients and colleagues and just friends that I've had over the technology. And I think some of that is that we have broken down some of those barriers. I'd say more than anything, I'm hopeful because of the fact of how we have responded, using whether it's technology or just pivoting to different ideas or different approaches to things, not just in how we work, but how we live. And The reality is that as difficult as this time is, I think that gives me a lot of hope that we can continue to adapt and change for the better over the coming months.
Now let's hear from Asif Dar, Jonathan Pierce, and Gopi Billa. So Asif, what gives you hope?
What we're experiencing is anything but normal. What gives me a lot of hope is, whenever it storms, you look for rainbows. And when it's at night, you look for the stars. And what you try to find out is the light or the opportunities that are allowing us to find a North Star and a new direction. And what we're going to see for sure is the way business operates will change. And hopefully, we'll put the employee and their health in the center of the way we think about employment in general. We'll also think about the digital tools, the processes of engagement, and we'll start thinking about how health starts where we live, where we work, and in our communities, because for sure the contagion does as well. So as we rethink society in general and employment and employers and how they interact with their employees and create the confidence so that those employees come back to work, it gives me great hope that those will stick and become the wave of the future.
I love that, Asif. I tell you, every time I ask this question, I actually get more hope about the future. So thank you for that. Jonathan, let's go to you. What gives you hope?
So I think there's a couple of things that come to my mind. The first is the resiliency of people. And I know all kinds of people across the country, across the planet, dealing with this in very different ways. And certainly for myself, I feel blessed to be dealing it from the position that I'm dealing it with. I think at the same time, I've been inspired, and we've all been struggling with changes to our daily lives, changes to our outlook for our financial futures, our business futures, the organizations that we're a part of. But through that, I think I've taken a lot of inspiration from people's adaptability and the speed with which people are finding creative ways to find new ways of working, new ways of engaging, new ways of building relationships and communities. I think that's really encouraging. And secondly, and tied to it, I think one of the things that we've been talking about at Deloitte for a while as a point of view is the rise of organizations as a social enterprise, as not merely a money-making enterprise. And I think this crisis has really brought a focus to the importance of organizations that employ workers around the world and the role that they play as critical institutions in society, in caring for people and their broad sense of well-being, as well as how the organization plays a role in the society at large. And so I think seeing that come to life, maybe faster than I would have expected because of the crisis, is another thing that makes me optimistic about the way we're renegotiating what is business, what is life, and how does it fit into the communities that we're trying to build.
Gopi, you've got a job ahead of you because those are two darn good answers. So what gives you hope?
Well, what really gives me hope is when I see my kids and their friends, how they adapted to the last couple of months. And if you believe that the organizations, businesses, and grown-ups have been affected by this crisis, the children have been affected significantly as well, without having the necessary coping mechanisms and not really knowing what's actually happening to them. So from going to schools and playing with their friends to not being able to see any of them, virtual learning, being at home, not being able to go out and run around and play. And despite that, the adaptability that they have shown, whether it's my children or the other children I look around and learn from friends, that actually gives me real hope.
What a memorable conversation with Tamika Puckett, Chief Risk Officer, City of Chicago, with Luke Fagor, Associate Vice President, Chief Risk and Compliance Officer at Northwestern University. Let's hear what they have to say.
I'd say that knowing that the people from this country and the world for that matter are resilient, that gives me hope for the future. We adjust and we adapt to all of the challenges that are thrown at us. We survive the pandemics within the pandemics, and we will get through this.
I love that. The ability to adapt. I mean, gosh, there's so many incredible stories about how people have adapted, whether it's working from home or, teaching their kids at home, all that great stuff. So great answer. How about Luke? What gives you hope for the future?
I would say, one thing that I'm encouraged and optimistic about is just how we've seen our campus community come together with a shared vision. And while those, the individual silos have opinions and different work streams, I think more than ever we've gelled as kind of a leadership team and as a campus community towards, again, kind of that shared vision. And so, so many times I think in corporations or in institutions as large as a research university like Northwestern, you're not always on the same page. And I think maybe more than ever before we've seen that something like this does bring us all together with that same approach.
An all-star cast from Deloitte, Larry Quinlan, John Twerdy, Shahira Henry, and Mike Rohrig share their perspectives. First up, let's hear from Larry.
People give me hope. It really isn't a technology thing, although I'm really encouraged about how technology has held up during this crisis. But the way people are adapting to it, the way people are helping each other, the way leaders rally around, the way we think about the well-being of others, the resilience that I see in times of not only COVID-19 crisis, but the crisis we see in the country now around social injustice, all of this packed into sort of a short period of time, the way people react gives me hope.
John, how about you? What gives you hope?
I agree with Larry full-heartedly here. I think the number one thing we've seen from our CIOs is the sort of reinvigoration of leadership. And so I think that fundamentally, as Larry said, with people, resiliency in terms of their ways of acting and working, responsibility, technical and social, and then their leadership in sort of pushing the envelope with technology to respond to the crisis. And now I think everyone's head is moving past response into what do I do next? And so that gives me hope that they're thinking of the right things, that technology will be able to help us thrive on the backside of this. And so I think our leaders are really stepping up.
I love that. And the reason being is you said reinvigoration of leadership. And I think sometimes in a crisis, a challenging time like this, we get back to what really matters. And I think that's probably why you're probably seeing this reinvigoration. Nishita, how about you? What gives you hope?
Yeah, I echo everything my colleagues said, and I'll add another one around the acceleration of innovation. Nothing drives change faster than necessity and disruption, right? And COVID, our social justice calls have all created disruption that we are all so ready for. And sometimes as humans, we talk ourselves into not doing, right? There's always a reason why we can't change. There's always some risk that we might take by upsetting the status quo. Well, I think that's turned upside down.
And Mike?
I would add, the amount of collaboration. I mean, I think in reality, this has been one big experiment in our ability as society to really collaborate towards change and defeat COVID-19. And now we're collaborating towards change, as Larry mentioned, around social injustice. And so I think when you flip that from a business perspective, we've seen competitors in different industries and public and private collaboration all towards, common goals. And I think it's that how do we get through this through collaboration mindset that, I can't but help us thrive in whatever the new normal is.
Jeff Bergner and Dave Oberst, let's hear what gives you hope.
What gives me hope is that we're actually seeing some positive economic activity on there. And I have a role where I deal with IPOs. And throughout this process, I have companies call and want to talk about going public. And when you're talking about April and being locked down and seems like things were going completely the wrong direction, somebody wanting to talk to you about trying to go public and all the positivity around it in 2021 was just something that, you know, I really latched onto, and it's a trend, as we'll continue to discuss, that has just accelerated over the course of the summer. But you could see the people that could see on the other side of the valley of this pandemic on there and see more positive times, and it's just been really refreshing to have conversations with companies like that.
Dave, let's turn to you. What gives you hope for the future?
Yeah, so I guess I'll answer it maybe in two ways. You know, on a personal level, you know, my daughter, my family give me a lot of hope for the future and help me keep me grounded in these times. From a professional standpoint, I would say it's really the creativity of professionals to continue to do their job, even in the midst of all these challenges. You know, when the country first kind of shut down in March, you know, we saw almost all the deals being put on hold as people were trying to figure out, you know, how are they going to move forward in this environment. And I think pretty quickly people realized that, you know, it was not going to be a very short-term thing, and they'd have to come up with a way to try and still get deals done. And that's really what we've seen, you know, starting kind of mid-April and onward. We just continue to see more and more deal activity because people are realizing, you know, this isn't going to stop anytime in the near future, and I still have to do my deals. So how can I get it done?
And that's one of the things I think is the narrative about COVID. It's how we've been able to adapt to this new virtual world. You're talking about deals. We had previously talked about closing the books virtually, which I would have thought would have been a real challenge, but it's awesome to see how so many of us have adapted. Building trust is critical as we continue to navigate the crises. Let's hear what Don Fancher, Lisa Buckingham, Gopi Billa, Jonathan Pierce, and Asif Dar have to say about how they build trust. What is one thing that leaders can do to build trust? And this could be with customers, it could be with employees, or it could be with other stakeholders. But one thing that leaders can do to build trust.
Be honest.
People want to believe that and have trust in the organizations that they interact with is hugely important.
I would go with honesty, and more than any other time, honesty, and within that transparency, what you do, how you handle yourself, how you communicate, and keeping the truth, not just to yourself, but sharing it with your employees and customers is going to be extremely important.
To me, it's about starting with listening, whether that's listening to customers, listening certainly to employees and workers and partners. And I think one of the great things is we're finding that we have at our disposal so many tools to enrich the two-way conversation we have with our stakeholders. And I think really starting there and getting creative about how to get those inputs so we can design for, as Asif says, a resilient recovery.
Work together. It's amazing what can happen when you listen, just like Jonathan says. When you listen and you consider the trade-offs together and the powerful ability for transparency to emerge and for people to really know that there are trade-offs, and collectively when employers and employees come together, have those conversations, great things can happen.
Well, you know the saying that my mother said to me, maybe yours said to you, is trust takes years to establish and moments to break. And that's exactly what you're describing. They can be, you know, and we've seen it time and time again.
The last 7, maybe even 8 months has been a challenge for all of us. But for me, a silver lining has been talking to all of these incredible guests. I love their insights on resiliency, hope, and trust. We've covered a number of topics in our Confronting the COVID-19 series, but if you want to hear something that we haven't covered, hit me up on LinkedIn or Twitter. And for more insights across all aspects of COVID-19, just go to Deloitte.com's COVID-19 page. You can also listen to the Resilient Podcast on Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, Stitcher, now Amazon Music, and even Spotify, or even your favorite podcast app. Until next time, stay safe and remain resilient.